One day I turn around at the blackboard and one of the students has a gun in my back.
Wait, just a minute. Let's talk about that. He has a gun in your back.
And I feel something and I turn around and there is a gun. And to be quite honest, I don't know how my concern shifted to the other students, just screaming, "Get under your desk," and talking, just looking him in the eye and knowing that he was a good kid, but he was just hurting. And somehow I got him to hand the gun over, but it really shook me to the core.
Right. Okay. Welcome to Becoming More, where we actually learn from other people and how they became more. Today's episode, we're going to learn about purpose and to thrive with purpose. If you've ever had a time in your life that you wondered, am I even on purpose? This is the podcast for you. Today, I am with Patti Boyle, my dear friend, who just published and released her new book. It's called Thrive with Purpose. And she asked me to do the foreword for her. And I'm just going to tell you the way that I started this out explains exactly who Patti is. I said, some people shift a room's energy without saying a word. And Patti Boyle is one of them. When I first met you, everybody in the room knew who you were. I mean, I was so amazed at how many relationships you have built. And you've consulted some of the best CEOs, executives from all over United States. And so
Actually, all over the world.
Oh my gosh.
So
well, let's get into
blessed.
this. You're a best-selling author, an executive coach. I've heard you speak. You're a great speaker. And you help leaders everywhere. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty with this Thrive with Purpose. And if you don't have this book, get it on Amazon. It's already an Amazon bestseller just before it's even been released. She has so many pre-sales. So actionable strategies, proven tools, and free resources for career transformation. I love that word, transformation.
So before we talk about transformation, Dianna, I just really want to thank you for having me join you today, because when I wrote Thrive with Purpose and was writing it, my whole purpose in writing Thrive with Purpose is that people would become more.
Yeah.
And I was reading your book and I was just so amazed at how you blend so beautifully in your book business and life, mindset, which is all about us having a purpose for what we're meant to be doing.
Well, that's why we get along, because I think you are one of the best executive coaches that I've ever met.
Well, thank
and
you.
I love
you're
coaching.
A great coach too.
That's why we get along. So let's get into helping people, because right now, Patti, I think a lot of people, they wonder, what is my purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Right. And you are absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
Every year, Gallup does the state of the workforce, and it never varies. It shows that only 1/3 of people are thriving in their career.
1/3 of the people.
And it even shows more devastation, and that's around the world. We're a little higher in the United States, but 15% are actually struggling to the point that they shouldn't be doing those jobs. It's detrimental to their emotional health, their physical health. I always blend in the spiritual component to it, but it destroys their physical health by doing jobs like that. Additionally, it destroys the productivity of the companies. You know, we have people who are just merely surviving or struggling, and that was the word thrive. Because my goal, and what's been so exciting about my job, is that for like over 30 years, I've worked with organizations in change, meaning they had restructurings, downsizings, right sizings, IPOs, leadership change. And that meant a lot of people found themselves without a job. They may have lost a job, but they didn't lose their purpose. And for those who did lose jobs that were in that, just surviving, struggling, I have just been so blessed over the years to see, and I would go so far as to say thousands, who just really get to do what they love doing.
So you help people actually do what they love doing. More importantly, though, I've heard some CEOs that you've literally helped them through some of those crises that they've gone through, that maybe they've lost their purpose and they're so focused on the money and the production. What do you do when you're consulting people that way?
Well, in the book, Thrive with Purpose, the biggest piece to it is whether they have chosen to leave a job or more often than not, might be forced out.
Yeah.
And that's not of their choice. So I have a set process that follows in the book. So immediately when somebody is in transition, they're either not happy in their job. And I honestly, I work with a lot of C-suite leaders, but I've designed programs for all levels, from everything from hourly workers, administrative, through the executive seats. I start with the first pieces, which you write so beautifully about, mindset.
That is a big part, isn't it?
Because when they lose a job, it is a life change, and it's one of the biggest life changes. It's right up there with the death of a loved one, a divorce. And so some people can get through it fast, others it takes longer. But the biggest part, the first part of my book, the first third of this book, is getting through the change of it, handling their mindset, doing things positive, taking care of themselves physically, emotionally. And ironically, it's almost like a Job story in the Bible. When it rains, it pours. I mean,
It keeps coming, right?
it's like we have poor Job who, loses his health and his children and all of his money. And it's like not uncommon for me to have people who don't just lose their jobs. I had one a couple years ago that the board forced him out. And then about 5 weeks later, his wife left him and stoned him. And it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. They have other losses. So it's dealing with that change. It's helping them to realize they may have lost their job, but they haven't lost their value. They haven't lost their talents. And the minute that they can start having a vision, which goes into the second part of what I do, is knowing who they are.
They look at themselves many times. I know I've done that, where I go, okay, I'm a CEO.
Right.
And so we start looking at that position as who we are.
Right.
Like I'm a mother, I'm an aunt, I'm a wife, and we define ourselves by those roles.
Right. And so many, and honestly, I say that I've worked with all levels of people. The higher up people get, more often than not, their identity is tied to, I'm a CEO, I'm a CFO. And that was a real positive for them, even though it doesn't feel like it. It's hard.
Well, and our friend John Maxwell says that you've got to go to something rather than leave something. And so when you're talking about that being forced out, you're being forced to leave, but you have nowhere else to go, especially if you have a non-compete. You can't do anything. And so now your purpose feels like it's being just shoved down. And as part of your book, you talk about your big why and what lights you up.
Right.
And I know every time I'm around you and you're talking with people and you're mentoring them, I just see you light up, which is your purpose.
Yeah, and that's like, I think why I just naturally love doing this is because well, my book starts with my story. And it starts with my story that for my first years, I was in education and I had this life event that was really traumatic for me. And it's in the introduction of my book. It was like I was what you call a trailing spouse to an oil executive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to find a job. And fortunately, like you point out, it's easy for me to meet people, but we moved like 3 times before we were in our mid-30s.
Wow.
And so, and I always found a job. So I was in 2 private high schools, taught AP Calculus and Physics, loved my job, was student activity director. And then we get transferred to Houston, and I take a position teaching in a public school, and it is really difficult. And it was really hard for me because it was the first time, first of all, the atmosphere was so different. The people around me were counting days until the end of the year, the other teachers. And one day I turn around at the blackboard, and one of the students has a gun in my back.
Wait, just a minute. Let's talk about that. He has a gun in your back.
Right. It's during final exams and I can feel something. And it's the old days, for the Gen Zs in here, they're probably wondering, what is a blackboard? What is chalk?
Yeah. What? Don't use the expression like nails on a chalkboard. They go,
Yeah.
it's a chalkboard. I don't understand.
And I'm putting the directions up and I feel something and I turn around and there is a gun. And to be quite honest, I don't know how I get concerned shifted to the other students, just screaming, get under your desk and talking, just looking him in the eye and knowing that he was a good kid, but he was just hurting. And somehow I got him to hand the gun over, but it really shook me to the core. And it wasn't just that. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And, I'd had another life loss and that my father had passed suddenly. And so I started, when we moved to Houston, the company that my ex-husband was with gave me career coaching. That summer, really felt like I don't want to go back to doing something, because I loved being a teacher and a student activity director and being an administrator in places where all of the other teachers loved what they did too, but just wasn't. And so I started to really do what's in here. And my career coach that I was, that was paid to help me started with Richard Bowles, who wrote "What Color Is Your Parachute?" And, like 5 years later, I was in a think tank with Richard Bowles in San Francisco.
Well, you've been places with a lot of great people.
Oh, yeah. And he's passed away, but I think he's the granddaddy of all career management because in those days, people didn't really look at it. But it started with my next step to this was who am I? And so this process just intrigued me. And there was a position at the University of Houston that said PhDs only apply. And I'm like, well, I didn't have on my PhD. I had my master's degree plus 30 hours towards my PhD, but not finishing your dissertation.
Wow.
I mean, that's huge in a university. And my career coach says, you'd be amazing because it was the associate director for all corporate training, and it was teaching 2 graduate classes in the learning and development. And I go, but I don't have, and this is what people do all the time. They say what they don't have. I don't have a PhD.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't have a PhD. He said,
what you do have.
He said, what you do have is you have the passion, you have the enthusiasm, you'd be great in all of those companies.
Well, plus you had physics. Come on. Physics makes the world go around. You and I do agree with that.
And the position was the director of the Center for Applied Technology. And people don't get that. I mean, my first degree is I taught AP Calculus and AP Physics. So, I did have that. And so he introduced me into the university. Now, this is important too. You don't just go in like by sending, in those days, you couldn't send it online, fortunately, but you don't just send your resume. What he did is he introduced me to the president of the university. That's the best place for people to
start, especially with someone else introducing you.
Because when the president of the university calls the dean and says, I want you to meet her.
Yes.
And this is what I tell anybody looking for a job. You need to be calling on who is the hiring manager. You just can't be. And today it's just so easy. People, I mean, it just breaks my heart. They sit 9 months, 10 months sitting on LinkedIn or Indeed, just going bing, 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 bing to jobs that probably don't even exist.
Instead of just going to the person.
And you put yourself in a lot of competition. So, I met the president who introduced me to the dean and who introduced me to the director. And it was a woman, a doctor, and she was a mother. And she, my father had been a coach. Her husband was a coach. And one of her kids all went to A&M. And we hit it off. And she says, we don't need the PhD. You have your master's. And as long as you have your master's, I want to hire you.
Well, so it reminds me of a part, though, that you say that growth starts when you go into curiosity.
Right.
And that's somebody that I've always seen you as. You're always asking questions, getting to know the other person. You're curious about their story. How has that helped form you, and how would it help other people?
Naturally, have a genuine curiosity about people. I mean, I think maybe what lights me up the most about working with as many people as I get to in is I find everybody's story so fascinating. I find all of their talents so unique, so different. And by what I get to do, like helping them to get to know themselves, I just love people watching. I mean, I love being in airports and watching people. We can just tell a lot about people.
Okay. This is so fun because in your book, you talk about having a sweet spot, which everybody does. You help bring that out of people, though, because I've watched you.
Well, they don't. A lot of people don't see it.
They don't even know what's inside of them, do they?
They don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first things, like I say, I do now, for the last 6 years, I've worked with probably up to 500 seat executives. And so I get a lot that are like all CEOs, or like I get a lot of CFOs, but not one of them are the same. I mean, every one of them is such unique because we all have unique where we're raised, how we were raised, our families, even the hardships people have. Those have molded people to bring them to where they are. And so we all have what I call a special brand. And I want that right across their LinkedIn, but they don't, until they work with me, it takes about, some get it. But, it really lights them up when they see, yeah, that is what's different.
Well, you bring out people's values, their skills, and their interests, and you say, there's the sweet spot. Now, how do we use that? And I like to say they take a stand for their limitations, and you have to take a stand for their greatness. And that's what you do every single day with these people. Listen, C-suite executives, I mean, come on. It's sometimes people think that CEOs and CFOs and COOs, they got it all together. Now, they've got it worse sometimes. They have to juggle in the air so many things that they have to do and people they have to watch. And, oh, don't say that because you might upset somebody, and don't do this and don't. And it's generally don't.
Right. And like I'm not going to say the person or the company, but I'm working with a corporate vice chairman now of a major company. And I have to work with him at 9:00 at night or Sunday at 5. Because that's the only time he has. And he told me, this is like so great because it's the only time I ever get to think about who am I and what would I want to do. And if I do anything, I'm working with them. I like working with people when they're not unemployed. When they're thinking about what is my 3 to 5 year plan? And if they can balance and find more time and balance their lives. But you talked about the sweet spot, the skills, interests, and values. In my book, I have that model because wherever people have skills, let's start maybe with college students.
Okay.
They have interests.
Yes.
So they've got to develop skills.
Right.
So, it's not going to get to perfect, but it is important, the values of where they're working, the culture of the company. And so that's with college students. So they have a lot of interests. They need to be developing their skills when they're like in college, not when they graduate.
Right.
To start, even though they have the degree. But then you get to like some of the people I work with that they've been 25, 30 years in the workforce. They've hit the pinnacle of success. So they have so many skills, but a lot of them, they're bored. Their interests, they don't have the interest anymore. Or more importantly, I live in Austin. So in Austin, it's a technology town. And so you also have to pay attention to the fact that our skills can be obsolete. So continue learning. And right now, I think one of the things we have to address is that everybody's biggest fear is that AI going to take my job.
No, it's definitely out there. And I love the fact that John Maxwell actually said today that AI is like a companion. It shouldn't be the one that makes the decisions. It shouldn't be the one that writes everything for you. You think, then you ask AI what it thinks, then you bring its thinking back to your thinking, but you still do the thinking. And that's the part that some people don't get.
Well, but it is a reality. And, so let me go back to my days at the University of Houston. What was I hired to do? It was the days when tech giants like Mike Odell had visions that every person in the world would have a computer.
Right.
Now I look at your desk and you have like 4 or 5, right? Now, can you imagine our lives without computers?
No.
But 20, 30 years from now, we're maybe not going to imagine our lives without AI. It's not going to replace people. People are going to have to learn it because it's just like the computers. So, years ago when I got into it, people were all worried like we were taking finance people off mainframes and manual processes and putting them on computers. And so I was able to see the one that limiting mindsets, and what you talk about in your book, and liberating mindsets.
Right.
I was able to see the ones that really wanted to go and learn the computer. And so, but those finance people all are like, the computer's going to take my job. No. Well, the computer did. It enhanced their job. It made it easier. Now, did it take some jobs? Well, yeah. So we had secretaries who took shorthand for CEOs or C-suite. Okay. But they still found jobs. They had to have a growth mindset and a willingness to grow and to learn. And I think AI is the same as a computer. I mean, it's a large language model. And I love technology. So, I love it. It can help to do research and things, but it's not going to it's not going to replace leadership. Not going to replace creativity. It's not going to replace our decision making. There's 8 million jobs out there right now that are unfilled.
Isn't that interesting? Because a lot of people say, well, I can't find a job. In your book, you actually help people write a bio. How do you write a bio? What should be in it? You take people through so much. You just lay out this roadmap that is excellent for whoever wants to get ahead.
Well, let's talk about writing the resume and bio, because this is another thing about working with. Okay, so I've been in these, like I talk about that people think I'm like George Clooney and Up in the Air. And if you haven't seen that movie, he goes in and fires people. No, but I can tell you that I trained the managers to treat them well when they were, I'd be on like 1,000 people being laid off with, like in Houston in those days when it was the computers, but they all found jobs. But the first thing people run into is, I want a resume. I want a resume. And I'm like, well, I'm not the person to write your resume. Because until first you have to handle your mindset. And again, you have to really start looking forward and having a vision for what's possible. And people don't. There is a grief process, and that is in my book. I mean, I pull from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote on death and dying. And, on days that we would be in those companies where they'd be laying off 6,000 people, you can see people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they go into denial, and then they go into bargaining, and then they get into anger, and then it is not until people get to acceptance. So that's the first step. Then second step, you need to really, like if you're traveling constantly and have never thought about who you are and what you do well and what you really still love doing, you've got to take some time and reflect and really deep down and look at who am I? And that's what my career coach did for me. He handed me Richard Bowles' little book. It says, your ideal job or next career. Right. And you have to go through, like, these are my skills, but these are my skills I still like doing. So you have to go through that part. And then the next piece to it, before you have a resume, is you would not build a house without putting a foundation. You would not be able to go, if you're starting a business, you cannot go to the SBA and get a loan without a business plan and a marketing, which includes a marketing plan. I don't want to minimize people. If they're looking for a job inside their company or outside their company, they have to look at themselves like the product. They have to look at their feet. They are the product.
That's the part that people sometimes don't get. They want to do all this stuff with AI and forget who the product is.
My first book, Transform Your Job Search, Turning Fear into Opportunity, when my marketing person called me and said, well, you got number 1 and you got number 3 on resume. And I started laughing and I go, if I were to write a book, it would be how to get a job without a resume. But I don't want your listeners to think, no, you have to have a very targeted, good resume. But you have to know who you are. What makes you unique? What makes you different? What makes you different from every other product architect that's doing technology?
That's so good. Yeah.
And then then you have to start going through your accomplishments and really looking, because it is your past, but you don't want your resume to be talking about your past. You want it to be your marketing plan, the vision of your future.
It has to have some personality to it.
Well, and it has to be about what you want to do, not what you've been doing.
Oh, that is so good. And the fact that you say use action words, use words that bring it alive, bring you alive.
Right. And like, all of the accomplishment statements start with action verbs. And then I hand all my clients like a whole sheet of like probably 400 or 500 action verbs in leadership and decision making. And I have them circled, and we start every one of them different. But then not only do those actions, it's like not what they did. That's like, so what? What was the impact? What was the results? Like, did you save the company money? Did you save them time? Did you streamline a process?
Did you help them make more? Did you multiply?
What is the results? What is the impact? Yes, that resume is really, really important, but I'll skip ahead. Today, there is nothing like LinkedIn, because before anybody will see you, they have looked, and so we write the resume, and then from the resume, I write a bio, which can be overall, but it's so LinkedIn has to match the resume.
Then here, your path to success with a career biography. I mean, all the things, you've got it all right here, folks. Thrive with purpose, actionable strategies, proven tools, and free resources for career transformation.
Well, and I do want to say that you do see there's a lot of visuals in there.
Yes, lots of great models. I love models.
My models are all on my website.
Excellent.
And on my website, which is www.purepotentialconsulting.com, I know it's a little long, www.purepotentialconsulting.com, there is a whole free resources. And in those free resources, there are a lot of these visuals that are in the book, but there are actually like people can download free assessments.
Good.
Like even the one I talk about, the life cycle, where they have multiple losses going on, because if they get over 300, like they have more than one loss of mine, which ties into the Department of Labor and all job titles and salary information. So that's
a
all
wealth
there.
of information.
And then I have 3 companion guides to this, because this is written for all people, but there's a QR code in the front, and there's an executive, a professional, and a college companion workbook.
College professional executive companion
and
workbook.
That's all free on my website.
Excellent.
You can go into the QR code.
You know, what I love about this is doing what you love, doing what you're good at, doing what the world needs. Now, that's the part. A lot of people say, I want to do what I love and do what I'm good at. And the world doesn't need it.
The last piece, that's the piece that
what can you get paid for?
I know. Like, people have a marketing plan, and then they tell me, and I'm like, you're looking for that salary, and you think you're going to, that's not your marketing plan if that's what you want to get paid.
Well, I need to make this much, so this is what I'm going to charge. And you go, but that isn't what the world is paying right
now.
Right.
And so that is the, so, we go into, who are you? What do you want to do? But, I think it's pretty simple. Who are you? What do you want to do? And who's going to pay you to do it?
And how much are they going to pay you to do it?
And you have to think about that, and you have to research that, and you have to see if that, this... it's not just about you. There's a family, and people have kids that are headed to college, and whatever it is, you have to keep this all in mind.
Well, and you have crafting your career narrative. I really like this part, because you take us through every part of our career narrative. So I'm not going to give this whole thing away. You got to read it.
But great book. Yes, I don't start with the resume. Where is it? They have to do all the work.
Oh, you have to do all the work in here before you actually.
And then they have to get, after they get all of those materials, they have to get to the most important piece, which is they have to get out and talk to people, not sit on LinkedIn and Indeed.
Right.
And just, it's a networking.
Well, and supercharge your LinkedIn with AI tools. You've got so many things in here. And yes, it's called work, WORK.
Right.
It's not spelled FUN. People want to go to work, get paid for fun, to have fun. No, it's called work for a reason, because
Right.
it's work, and it takes work.
Exactly. And it takes work to find a new position. And a lot of people I work with, they don't even leave their companies. They find new positions in their companies. It takes exploration. It takes work. It
Well, and
takes,
sometimes they create them.
they do.
You've got to create your own job sometime. Work your way out of that job. You're so good, they have to put you into another one. And people love to get advancements, but they don't work for
And
them
that's
enough.
where they need to get out. And, you know, one of the most important tools that's in this book is what I call informational interviewing.
Yes.
And there's a book that I really like. It's called The 20-Minute Networking Meeting.
Yes.
And so, like for me, when I made that huge shift from education and then eventually into business, you've got to get out and be talking to people and be curious and asking them good questions. And you want to be really prepared to meet with people who are doing what you want to do now or what you want to do 5 years out.
You say in the book that you've got to find the experts.
You do.
Why would you not find the best people that you can? I mean, I remember selling things to get into the first thing I did with John Maxwell. And then it was, okay, who else do I need to get to know? Okay,
Right.
Ed Bastian. Well, I already knew Zig Ziglar and Norman Vincent Peale, people that younger people listening to this don't even know.
The two of us talking about all these icons.
Jim Rohn. I mean, great philosophers that help. Yet you got to get in the room because we become like the people we hang out with.
Well, and that's what Jim Rohn, wasn't it Jim Rohn that did say, you are the 5 people that you hang around all day long. And people really, once they have everything together, it's about, in that marketing plan, I have them say, what are 30 to 50 places? That one piece that you say, you know, where in the world, who will hire you and pay you for that? And I have them research and come up with that and then get to the experts. And in the book, there is a model, I call it the ABCs of networking.
Okay. Well, you're a great networker.
Yeah. Okay.
So do that.
The A's, one of my CFOs, one time, one of my former clients who was a CFO, he goes, "Oh, those are the people that are in your phone that can text you and they don't need to put their name." I go, "Exactly." So you know, the average person probably has 250 to 300 people that knows and loves them. Okay, so when they're looking, and if they're in a company, like let's just say they're an Oracle or something, they need to know who the A are to get them to another to the B, because ultimately you're wanting to get to the hiring manager. But you really, if you're looking to do something that will be very intentional and purposeful, you want to get around people who are doing it and go interviewing.
You can't become like somebody you don't know what they're like, right?
Right.
And so you can either pull people up or you got to get out of there. Otherwise, because you don't want to go down, you don't want to become less than what you are. So if you're around people that are not making the same as you, they're not doing the same as you want to bring them up, and you still have to have people that you go see and you're around that bring you up. You're the smartest one in the room. You're in the wrong room. I both agree with that.
We're not in a liberating mindset, like you call it. We're not in growth. We're not.
Well, we're all students. And I think sometimes people love, especially CEOs, love being like, hey, everybody listen to me. No, great CEO questions and find out.
You know, great CEOs, and I have been so fortunate ever since I've even been young to be around, like, in those major oil companies in Houston and I was really young. But what I find about a lot of, they didn't get where they were without being very self-aware, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses.
And they got feedback.
A
lot of companies, they don't give feedback anymore. They just, like you were saying earlier, they bring you in and just let you go. And you don't even know what you did.
Well, that's tragedy. You know, I mean, I guess I was fortunate that when I was doing a lot of the career transition and designing it where they were laying off, companies really cared about the people. Good. But there was a good reason for them to care. I mean, they genuinely cared, but the biggest reason they should care is the productivity, because those remaining employees, when they see 30,000 employees who are their friends, and who are their friends, their bosses, their subordinates get laid off by text, What do you think is happening to those surviving employees in that
They
company?
actually go into fear and they're afraid. A lot of them won't even talk to the people
I mean,
anymore. They're afraid if they talk to them that they'll be outcast or something.
well, they have survival guilt.
Yeah.
And, not only, they're afraid, they feel so bad. And then at some point, it's just human nature. These were their friends,
Yeah.
and
30,000 of them. Yeah.
yeah, and when I see that happen, people don't realize these people have families, and they have a whole bunch of things going on.
Mhm.
I remember one time I was it was horrible. It was like a company outside of Houston
Yeah.
where it was after I sold my company. They were laying off somebody and they wanted everybody laid off by noon. And I didn't like going on the day the people were laid off, but my coach, his mom got really sick, so I went. And the
Uh-huh.
company put me in the car and said, "We're going to St. Luke's." And I go, "Why are we going to St. Luke's?" Because we need to lay her off by noon, and her father is in intensive care.
Wait, just a minute. She's in intensive care with her father, and they're going to go to the hospital to lay her off. Let me tell you. Yeah.
And
Those
I've
people
seen it,
sleep at
but
night.
I have to tell you, I've seen the best of the best
Yeah.
too, where companies really, but one of the things is their productivity is way higher when they treat people right. But I've seen
Yeah.
that's the worst case scenario. I mean, I saw a company up in Dallas lock the doors and change all of their passwords, and that's how they found out. That's
Well,
the way to treat people.
I know people that received things that said, this is your last paycheck in an email, right? Hey, we just sent your last paycheck to you. And that's how they found out that they were no longer even desired to be there anymore.
But, to any leader out there listening to us today, I want them to think about this because these people have families. I mean, in some of these layoffs, you have like her that her father is in intensive care. We have people that need health care because their wives or have cancer. We had one, fortunately, the company was treating him well, but he got laid off, and then his 17-year-old son woke up and was what? And don't know what's going on. And these are people. And what's amazing is that they've been working hard for the company. They love the company. And after they get laid off, they're all worried about but I got to go back and finish this. Nobody's going to know I'm working. And so, if there's anything, companies have moved away from, being compassionate, as much as they
Yeah,
could
I
be.
think the compassion and the empathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, but more importantly, giving them feedback before they even lay them off, like, hey, technology is coming. We want to look for you. Maybe we're going to be looking in somewhere else. Can we help you get more skills? Can we help you find a job? Can we help you versus giving them the boot and get the heck out of here? We don't want you anymore after you've given us all your life, right?
And that is with AI going to be the reality that I really hope with the, it's going to take a group effort. And I write about that. It's going to take government. It's going to take universities. It's going to take companies all coming together because we have to reskill this whole workforce to keep up with robotics and AI and all the emerging technologies.
Yeah, and I think when we start becoming more collaborative, more communicative, oh boy, my mouth didn't want to work on that one. I was 5. I've had people that are so caring and give you feedback all the time. I've had people that tell me, hey, this isn't working. Let's get going in this way. I've had people say, that isn't the way we do it. You can handle it all. It's the ones that don't give you any feedback.
But a lot of the companies, and this started with computers, that when professionals started getting laid off, there is a business reason. The people need to be reskilled and upskilled to go get jobs, but how they do it, I mean, they just need to, and I will tell you, probably the first, like when you hear about these mass layoffs of 10,000, and we're hearing a lot in the technology sector right now because of the emerging technology. Oftentimes, the managers have a harder time laying the people off they don't know how to do it. I mean, it's just like the death of a loved one, so it really does take some compassion, putting yourself in the people's shoes and just saying to yourself, how would I want to be treated?
Well, and even letting them know what they did great for the company versus berating them and making certain that they feel terrible about themselves. We're going to send you out of here, making sure that you're just worth nothing at all. Right?
And these are people who have poured their hearts and souls into the company. I mean, they're great people through no fault.
Let me tell you, thrive with purpose. I know that people talk a lot about purpose. They talk a lot about thriving, but puts it all together for you. And it has your own special workbook, whether you're a student, you're a CEO, or just in the workforce wondering what you should do. Get Patti's new book. It's out now.
It's been out since November 1st, but can I tell you something I'm doing next week?
Yes.
Okay, so I wrote a companion guide that I published.
Yes.
And it's Faith at Work.
I love that.
And it's bringing together faith and purpose and meaningful work. And it's a Christian-based, biblically-based book. And next week I'm doing whole launch called Hope for the Holiday.
Oh, I love that one. So when is your Hope for the Holiday? Is it one or a series?
So for 3 days, December 16th through 18th, people can download it off of Amazon.
Okay.
Or they can go to my website, www.purepotentialconsulting.com, and they can download the free ebook. It is a journal. It is a devotional and journal. And it starts with an idea and then has a Bible verse and then has some reflection questions and has every chapter of the prayer.
So it does help you even find out who you are spiritually.
Right. So it's a spiritual Christian-based book.
Well, and we need all of that. Patti, thank you so much. We didn't get into everything that we desire, calling our purpose, all of these things, yet we'll have you back again. So once again, thrive with purpose. That's what we all desire to do. And we trust that you're going to grab the book off of Amazon. Give it for a Christmas gift, for heaven's sake. Okay.
Thank you, Dianna.
Love that you're here, and we both agree on mindset.
Mindset, and you are the mindset master.